From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalysts, the podcast that explores the qualities of community leadership and the many paths it can take. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. Be sure to follow, subscribe, or tap the like button so you never miss an episode. Hey, if you've been listening for a while, you know that we're republishing episodes from Civic Strategies, the podcast originally produced by Otis White, the now retired founder of Atlanta-based Civic Strategies, his company, in collaboration with the Georgia Municipal Association. Recorded between 2011 and 2015, his series offers timeless insights from community leaders on the challenges and rewards of civic leadership. Today, we're tuning into Otis's conversation with Kathy Swahn, Executive Director of the Drake House in Roswell, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta. The Drake House's mission is to empower women and their children facing homelessness to find stability and achieve lasting independence. As we enter the holiday season, this episode is a poignant reminder that communities aren't defined by buildings or boundaries, but by people who care, who show up, and who choose to help each other, especially in times of need.
Hello and welcome to Civic Strategies, a podcast about cities and their leaders produced in cooperation with the Georgia Municipal Association. I'm Otis White. On our show today is Kathy Swahn, Executive Director of the Drake House, a nonprofit that serves homeless women and children in Roswell, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta. The Drake House is an impressive organization. It houses up to 16 families for a limited period of time, usually 3 to 6 months, but it packs a lot into that period because its aim isn't just to get families off the street, but to get them back on their feet. And it does this through counseling with the mothers on employment, parenting, and life skills, and counseling for the children if it's needed. And it seems to work. Less than half of the women who come to the Drake House are employed when they arrive, but more than 75% are working when they leave. The average monthly income of a Drake House family rises 57% as a result of the counseling and the connections formed there. And they usually leave with money in the bank. A big part of the life skills counseling is about managing money. Last year, Drake House mothers collectively saved nearly $44,000 that they could then use in establishing a new life for their families. As impressive as all of this is, the story behind the Drake House may be even more so. That's because the Drake House is less than 10 years old, and it started as a community leadership class project, a project that became a passion for the 28 people involved in that class, and eventually became a cause for a number of communities in Atlanta's northern suburbs. One of the founders was Kathy Swahn. As I mentioned, she is now the executive director, but her earliest involvement with the Drake House was as part of that Leadership North Fulton class that saw a need and ended up creating a community cause. Kathy has been involved in nonprofits for 2 decades, first as a community volunteer in North Fulton County, then as a professional fundraiser, now as an executive director. And with that introduction, welcome, Kathy Swahn.
Thank you, Otis.
Walk us through what happens to women and their families when they come to the Drake House. How is it different from what they might experience in a conventional homeless shelter?
We consider the Drake House a hybrid housing program. Typically, women who find themselves homeless end up in shelters, typically downtown. Often, boys 12 and over are separated from their mother at their most critical time. So our goal in developing the project was to serve an unmet need in our community, give the opportunity for these families to remain intact so they have a private apartment that they can call home through their program stay.
You have 16 apartments here. So how many families do you serve in a year's time? And how many have you served since the Drake House opened in 2006?
We serve on average of about 50 families a year and about 100 children a year. Of course, the family size varies. Most common, 2 to 3 children for each family, but we can house families up to 5 or 6 children. We have 1 and 2 bedroom apartments available, and depending on the age and sex of the children and the number of children in the family, that would determine which unit, if they they would get a 1 or a 2 bedroom. We opened our doors in June of 2006, and since that time, we've served 288 families and 513 children.
And one of the things that's different about the Drake House is the deep connections it has created within the community. Can you give some examples of how religious organizations and community groups work with your family?
From our inception, in fact, when this was just a seed, we knew that we needed not only revenue streams, but also volunteer support. And so our very first reach was into the faith community. Our faith community up here has a long history of servicing special needs and human service needs for families in need up here in the North Fulton area. So we reached out to all of the large local churches, certainly the civic organizations. And as a reminder, we were formed through the Chamber of Commerce, so we have a very high level of corporate support. So those were our 3 initial support partners, if you will, revenue streams. So the faith, the civic, and the corporate community.
Now, some of the churches actually adopt specific units within the apartment. What do they do for the families?
Each apartment is sponsored by a faith partner. It's called our Neighbor to Neighbor partnership. They not only support us financially to help us offset costs for utilities and taxes and insurance and that type of thing, but I think more importantly, it gives the folks within that faith community to work hand in hand with the families that we serve. Every mother and every child that live at the Drake House are assigned a mentor. And these mentors are trained by our director of programs, and they walk through the journey with these families. Our staff kind of offers the tough love side. They're professional social workers that keep the families on task through their empowerment program. But the mentors coming from the faith community will take the children to a movie or take them to a park, really come over and just talk and be the shoulder that they need to walk through this journey.
And you do an amazing variety of fundraising activities, rummage sales, and that sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We have 2 large fundraisers per year. The first one is the Miss Mary's Ice Cream Crankin', which will bring in 3,500 people into the Roswell Historic Park to eat ice cream, 140 flavors of ice cream for $6. So it's a fun family type event. It's always the last Sunday of the month in August. Again, corporate, faith, and civic partners help us pull that off, and we'll net usually between $45,000 and $50,000 in that 2-hour event. The other is our Drake Walk, which is a newer fundraiser. We'll have our 4th one this May, where we use the partnership with the historic merchants in Roswell, and our walkers basically visit the merchants and get a little passport stamped to support the merchants, but also to support the Drake House. So we've had incredible support from the community. And then there are always small community events. We're very blessed as we age for folks in the community to recognize the need to support us, and they'll host small community fundraisers.
Now, a lot of cities and probably most neighborhoods would resist having a place for homeless people in their midst. So what was the reaction to the Drake House here in Roswell?
We anticipated that there would be some pushback, and we were putting the project together. One of our first stops was the mayor's office in Roswell, and we got a resounding level of support from them. They recognized the need, and I think that's part of our success is because we located in a community that embraced the work that we were trying to do.
Tell us the story of that Leadership North Fulton class. What were you asked to do as a class project? What was the assignment?
The assignment was for the class to separate into small groups and create small service projects. You're given a menu of nonprofits that you could select from, and it was from building window boxes to creating a playground to landscaping projects, marketing projects. And I reflect on this, and I'm not sure what it was the constitution of this class decided that we wanted to take on really a more impactful gift. And we reviewed needs in the community, and this one really hit home with these 28 business leaders. And we decided as a group to focus on one class project. We had to get it approved by chamber leadership. We did break up into small groups that did site visits all over the city looking at women's shelters to gather best practices. And the information that we came back with further compelled us to move toward this mission.
You discovered that there was this big unserved need in this community. Well, what was that need? What was it that you saw that was just calling out for a solution? And why did that resonate with this particular group?
We learned that homeless mothers had no options. The service providers in the community would basically send these families downtown to
Meaning to downtown
shelters
Atlanta.
downtown, removing them from their school, their employment, their faith, their neighborhoods. And once down there, reflecting again on the fact that if the family had boys 12 and older, they were separated from their mothers. It was just a crisis situation all the way around. And the families that we serve might not look like the typical homeless family that you might see wandering the streets of an urban setting. These are hardworking families that just a simple bump in the road has sent them out on the curb. Many living in their vehicles or staying in extended stay hotels.
Now, most community leadership classes lose touch with each other fairly quickly after the experience is over. So what kept everybody working on this project?
Well, I think there were so many people that were inspired by the project. We actually had 9 out of the 28 serve on our founding board of directors. And then we identified very strategically partners to serve on that board across segments of the community in order to diversify the board, further reach into the community. So we built a board of 17, brought in faith leadership, which we did not have represented in that class. And 4 of those 9 served as executive officers. I myself served as president for 4 years. And I think just the common vision kept us all focused. It took us a year to create a nonprofit, to acquire a 501c3. We built a partnership with Home Aid Atlanta, which is the nonprofit arm of the Atlanta Home Builders Association. It took us 14 months to develop that relationship. But what happened was they came in and did a total renovation of a decrepit apartment complex that was slated for demolition.
And that's where it is now.
Correct.
This is where the Drake House is today.
Yes, and we're located central to our service district in the heart of Roswell. We do serve Sandy Springs North in the Fulton County area, Sandy Springs, Roswell, Milton, Alpharetta, and Johns Creek. But a lot of these folks truly bonded and really wanted to see this project to fruition.
When you're going to establish something like the Drake House, you need something bigger than just a community leadership class. You mentioned visiting the mayor early on, but who were the most important people you needed to make connections with in order to make this project successful?
Well, the good news is we have a strong relationship across segments in the community. I know I've lived up here for 35 years. It pays to know the city leadership, the elected leadership beyond the city. We certainly work with Fulton County, the state of Georgia, and even we do get some federal funding. So we have relationships with elected officials across the spectrum. Faith leadership is critical. As an example, if we have a need for, say, something for our food pantry, we can reach out to our faith leaders and they'll do a pulpit call and boom, the next week we're set. Corporate leadership is very important. And foundational leadership, again, it's just bringing the right people to the table, offering the opportunity to have doors opened. I mean, we welcome the community, support our work, and most do because they're just called to the type of work that we do.
What you're describing is a nonprofit or a need that suddenly becomes a cause in which a lot of people are seeing a little bit of themselves in this. So looking back on it, how did that happen and what did you all do to help that process along?
Well, I think this organization, the leadership class from the beginning, wanted to make an impact in their community. They wanted to leave a legacy for the community and at the same time serve a level of people in the community that are often neglected and forgotten. There's always going to be a level of need. There's always going to be about 9, 10, 11% of the population that's living in poverty. These are the service level people. This is your workforce. And we, as a group, decided we were going to embrace these people, and we came into a community that we knew that would support our work.
So in the end, was it the story you were telling, or was it the storytellers? Was it the people who were telling those stories that made such an impact on the community?
Boy, that's a good question. We have been very blessed with volunteers that can tell the story, and we do have a very impactful story to tell. When you're talking about a mother and her minor children sleeping in her car, teenagers who won't go to school for the 3rd day in a row in the same clothes that they went to on Monday, eating and living out of their car, that's a compelling story. You know, certainly we have good storytellers, but we have a strong story to tell.
Why is it called the Drake House?
We named the project for Mary Drake. Mary was a longtime supporter of families in need in the North Fulton community. She's a Roswell native. She helped found North Fulton Community Charities, which was the original outreach organization to serve families in need. And she was 82 when we named this after her. She unfortunately passed away about a month before we had our ribbon cutting, but she knew that we had named this in her honor for her 40 years of work for the community.
Reflecting back on the experience since 2006, is there a secret to turning a community need into a community cause? If somebody from another city were to come here and ask you, how can we do what you did at the Drake House? What would you say are the keys?
Well, I think you have to have a deep-seated passion. This was not an easy project. It literally took 3 years of research and work and needs assessment and surveys and identifying funding streams. But beyond that, I think identifying key leadership, identifying a diverse level of leadership. We were very strategic in our board development. We need advocates in the community to reach across segments. And I would say it's certainly doable. We've had many organizations and individuals visit the Drake House trying to replicate the work that we do. And we would welcome that. As I said, this population is never going to go away, population of need. And I just think it takes a persistency.
Thank you, Kathy. My guest has been Kathy Swahn, Executive Director of the Drake House in Roswell, Georgia, talking about how community needs become community causes. This has been Civic Strategies. I'm Otis White. Thanks for listening.
As always, I share my thanks and appreciation to Otis White for sharing his Civic Strategies podcast with listeners of Community Catalysts. You'll find a link to his resource-rich Civic Strategies website in the program notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating and reviewing Community Catalysts on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your support helps others discover the show. This episode was edited by Nick Living the Dream Tantillo. Our executive producer is John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. If you have a question or comment about today's topic, I'd love to hear from you. Reach me at 602-688-2724 or Matt, M-A-T-T, at socialprosperity.us. And if you or someone you know has a story of community leadership that would be a great fit for a future episode, let's connect. I'm always on the lookout for impactful people and compelling stories. Click the podcast guest link in the program notes. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.